everyone. Want to get us started? Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight to our Functional Life Forum. Tonight is on weight loss, metabolism through mindset. If I have that correct.
Metabolism in mind.
Yeah. Moderated by our own Dr. Don.
Hello. Ready?
Yep. Start us off. Go ahead.
All right.
Yours.
Tonight, I really want it to be a forum. So, unleash your restrictions and jump in there with thoughts. Let's have a really good forum on this topic. It's a topic that I know all of us, either professionally, or personally, have addressed. The concept or the thought of weight loss, the practice thereof, the seemingly cyclical practice thereof of weight loss. I just want to start out that I started in my nutrition path or journey with weight loss almost 30 years ago, and trying different dietary plans, even back in the Atkins day, with people. And man, I met with some success and a lot of failure way back when. And up until maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, it's still an immense challenge, but one that I absolutely love because of the complexity of it. I think it's perhaps one of the most complex and difficult change transforms that we can assist and to coach other humans with. I'm not saying other things are not difficult, but man, oh man, when it comes down to things like eating something that is absolutely essential to life, to get people to be successful at it and achieve against so many odds against them is beyond challenging, but also incredibly satisfying. And again, it's not simply, as we all know, that they were successful. We'll define whatever that success is. Do they maintain it? Have they embraced a lifestyle, a belief system? Have they changed belief systems? There's so much more to it. And not that, by the way, there's so much to get into. I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to just throw up some ideas today for us to really talk about and kick off maybe some other thinking. So let me start with weight loss. And really, it's not about weight loss, right? It's about fat loss. It's called weight loss, but boy, oh boy, is that the wrong term. And here I'd like to start with some of the thoughts on the mindfulness aspect, on the language aspects, the language component of this. So it's loss. And boy, have we not spoken or heard enough about abundance thinking and scarcity thinking. And it's usually coined or spoken about in different areas. But let's think about it here. The aspect of the difference between weight loss and lean gain. Weight loss and lean gain. Now, here's the thing. The problem with weight loss, you can take two women. They both weigh, let's say, 180 pounds. And both women are looking to get down to, let's say, a goal weight of 120 pounds, a 60-pound weight loss. Now, you can take both of these women through two different plans, and they both can get down. And let's say also at 180 pounds, they started at 34, 35% body fat, which of course is not, it could be higher than that, but they both start around the same body fat. Let's just say make it easy at 35%. And they both lost 60 pounds. They were both 120 pounds, but they look totally different. Not only in looks, but also in their metabolism. And so the one woman lost 60 pounds, and she went from 35% body fat, and she's roughly around 26% body fat, 27% body fat. The other woman lost 60 pounds, and she's down at 19% body fat. Okay, and both the woman who lost who lost in the body fat went down to say 27% body fat, the metabolism was worse. Her metabolism, which started, and we'll get into this about efficiency, a very efficient metabolism actually got worse. And many people on dietary programs, many experts who are taking people through, will hit plateaus. Plateaus are nothing more than metabolic, you're not enhancing metabolism, you're reducing an already reduced metabolism. And you hit a plateau. Calories have to be changed, other things along those lines. Of course, it's calorie is not a calorie. But the two women are different. The one woman who is at 19% body fat is taking up much less space. We know that a pound of fat and a pound of muscle, a pound of fat takes up much more space than a pound of fat. So the one woman looks entirely different, and the woman who is leaner has much more. She gained more muscle. She gained muscle mass. She dropped fat. She's more metabolically active because she just has more muscle. And by the way, and that's lean mass. That's lean mass. Boy, I hear more times, I don't want to gain muscle. I don't want to do this. My Lord. The thing is that the average American, the average Westerner, will lose 8 to 10% of their lean mass per decade. I'm sorry, 8 to 10 pounds, not percent, 8 to 10 pounds of lean muscle mass per decade. Whoop.
Where'd you go?
Yeah. Hold on. I'm on my damn phone. So are you there? I'm here. I'm back. That was my son calling me in from China, actually. Yeah, no, we're all good. All right. So, as sorry, he should stop soon. All right. As a person loses, 8 pounds of lean mass, metabolically active tissue that's burning calories 24 hours a day, of course, the total metabolism goes down. They don't change their calorie loads. And of course, they start gaining fat. I mean, that's one basic aspect, right? So I talked to you about, I introduced this because I think it's very important. It's very important for coaches or those of us who are looking to help people with weight loss, that we're really watching their body fat percentage, their leanness. Are they becoming leaner, or are they just becoming smaller versions of their fat self, in essence? And it's unbelievably important that we are changing them. It's incredibly important that we're resetting their metabolism. It's not something about weight loss. We must transform their metabolism from a highly efficient. That's what people are who are overweight and obese. Their metabolisms are incredibly efficient, which I'll get into. Efficient in the aspect that their bodies are misers with burning calories. They suck every little piece out of 1 calorie, whereas a metabolism that's higher is burning calories like a drunken sailor with a fistful of 50s at port. It's just throwing calories left and right. And so what we're looking for is inefficient metabolisms, right? A metabolism that a body and a brain and a metabolism that believes it's fine no matter what it does. It can go through calories. It's not in a starvation mode, something that we're going to talk about in a second. Because that's, by the way, this is a really key point, and this is something of my own design. This is something of my own thoughts that I developed within the past 10 years, that people who are overweight, particularly obese, that means above a 30% body fat, that their bodies believe they are starving to death. I'll say that again. People who are overweight, particularly body fats of 30% or more, their bodies believe they are starving to death. Why? On an evolutionary basis, fat was life. Fat is meant to be harvested, stored for lean times. Our ancestors, we're only here because our ancestors were really good at storing fat. If you weren't, you died. And you were taken out of the gene pool. So, lost my train of thought. So what happened is that Oh, in evolution, we have things inside of us that look at lean mass. We have things inside of us that know that our lean mass is of a certain amount. If the lean mass, if muscle starts to break down, it's called sarcopenia, we're starving. That's what happens. When you're starving, you go through your fat, and then you start going through your muscle, and your muscle mass goes down. Now, in evolution, there wasn't obesity. Fat was necessary. We don't have things inside of us that measure the amount of body fat. It doesn't exist. But as body fat starts going above, and really going above evolutionary parameters, as the body fat expands, it looks relatively like our lean mass decreasing. It looks as if the body believes that our lean mass is decreasing. It's called relative sarcopenia. And then it goes into action. It thinks we're starving, and it goes into action. And this is where we see the aspect of inflammatory cytokines. We see all types of things being messengers being sent out. The metabolism goes even lower. The body believes that starving to death, it's going to set the metabolism lower and lower to preserve what it believes is a starvation. And additionally, often the diet, the processed diets, they're high calorie malnutrition. So we're additionally not getting the nutrient density, and that's registered through a different mechanism, that we are nutrient malnourished or nutrient starving. So it's a different mechanism, but highly important. You see different protocols that do nutrient density, and people will lose weight. Things will change with them. Their cravings will stop. Things will stop with them, allowing them to lose weight. I just want to throw that in as an aside. So here's the deal. 100,000 years ago, you were starving. Maybe you lasted a month. Probably not. You lasted 2 or 3 weeks. And all of the preservation biochemistry that was going on to save life, right, only lasted a few weeks. What we have, and this is why they talk about inflammation and other things as the root of disease, and that's why people who have obesity have so many health issues, is because something that only lasted a few weeks now lasts years and decades. People are in this state for decades, which is causing disease states, chronic disease states of all kinds. So I just want to throw that out there. Now let's get into the language. So this is why when I did a lot of this, I don't do it really. I really don't do it anymore. But I love to talk about lean gain, not weight loss. I wanted people to think about gaining their leanness, right? If you drop body fat, you gain leanness. Even if you don't put 1 pound of muscle on, your leanness increased. You gain leanness. Now this goes into the thinking of like abundance. Gain is about wealth. Gain is about abundance. It's abundance thinking. Weight loss is about scarcity thinking. Ingrained in the very words itself, when we're working with people, when we're talking about weight loss, we are inducing scarcity thinking. So now let's go one step further, the unconscious mind. If you lose your keys, if you lose something, your unconscious mind kicks in, starts to, where did you leave them? Let me find them. And you will eventually find your keys, most likely. Your unconscious goes crazy. You lost something, I'm going to find it. Well, let me tell you, when you tell someone, I lost 10 pounds, your unconscious is engaging. They're going to find that 10 pounds plus. It's your unconscious, in the aspect, I lost 10 pounds, kicks in and starts to look and find those 10 pounds that you lost. It's almost ingrained in the unconscious aspect of protection. The unconscious, the unconscious doesn't know right from wrong. It knows about being programmed. It knows about self-preservation. It knows about keeping you safe, even though it may not be safe, because of how you're talking to it from the conscious state. So let's talk about people. Let's talk about people and humans today. We all know less movement, more high-calorie malnutrition, and they're constantly bombarded with pressure food messages, from fast food to commercials to driving on the highway, driving on the road, seeing the signs, constantly being bombarded with messages to eat. Messages to eat. It's an incredibly difficult time. These are the mindful messages that are coming from the outside. So we have people moving less, from which, on an evolutionary basis, we were built to move. And I want to share this with you. And by the way, this is kind of just me sharing my stuff, you know, over the years. That's really what this is. And I'll get through a bunch, and then we'll open up for talk, and then I'll share some other stuff with you guys. But you know, the people who tend to have weight problems, very efficient metabolisms, and for things I already talked about. These humans are built to move. They need movement more than the individual who doesn't have a weight problem, and actually probably moves a lot more than the person with the weight issue. They are built genetically on an evolutionary basis to move. They must move more. Their body and their brains need it in order to activate their genetics, in order to activate their genetic expressions. And when they do not move, those genetics, which really make them superior, in a full genetic expression, people who are obese, people who see themselves as heavy all their life, they are actually, in my opinion, homo superior. They actually have extremely highly evolved genetic capacities, which go awry in a modern society which is anti-evolutionary. I tell all my people, I have in the past told all my people, especially the women, but women and men, how superior they are. They've been told, they've been either told or directly or indirectly influenced that they are less. And in truth, they are actually more. They are more because they are built to survive. If all the food went down, if we had problems, the skinny people would die, they would come into their own. They could live on a few berries and a cup of water a day. And they are genetically superior. And that's the truth. Doesn't come from me. That comes from the greatest weight loss researchers in the world. Okay. So just as a thought, we know with when we talk about weight loss and metabolism, and I'm not going to be talking about the specifics here. I'm going to give some stuff at the end, but you know, and I know people talk about move more. We got to move people more, but it's true. From walking or anything, these people must move more because we move less. And of course, as everyone knows, shifting the high calorie malnutrition, and we all do it. And so, and I would love to talk about this at some point as far as how do you define which dietary practice, which dietary habitus is better for specific individuals. We have lots of stuff out there, you know, eat right for your type and all types of things, which are all good, by the way. And I like those approaches that are looking for kind of a genetic component. Me personally, I look at the autonomic nervous system also, and then move into stuff like that. But let's move away from that and look at some other stuff where it goes into mind control. So I just, before I get by the way, before I go on, anybody want to jump in there? Anything I've said, jump in, share, please.
You were talking.
Oh, go ahead.
You were talking classic malts there, Don, about reprogramming the unconscious. Definitely reframing here is what you're beginning to sound like you're looking to help the person to be able to understand, especially when you're talking about moving from weight loss to lean gain. You're reframing in the language.
Yeah, I mean, reframing would be like NLP, like you know, right? I mean, you're pretty much an expert in NLP, but and other things. But yeah, to an extent, yeah. Someone want to say something else? Anybody else jump in there? Anybody?
I wrote down questions as you were going.
Okay.
But the last things I was writing down was there's a lot of people, actually even in our book club yesterday, weight gain was a part of your frame of mind mentally, and it talked about people that have weight issues are usually in a protection mode of themselves, and it can be cleared with an unconscious belief of something else, but also, which has come up in a different functional forum that you have done, is when we live our lives in constant stress like we are today, our cortisol levels are so high that we cushion ourselves very beautifully with fat. We hold on to it because we're in that, fight mode of, holding on to, we hold on to the fat that way just because, and our food is absolute crap. I mean, that's a whole other thing. Our body is so nutrient deficient that it's constantly hungry, and we keep putting non-food in it to make more and more fat. So I think it's a different kind of fat, not a healthy fat that people are today, which is a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, by the way, you're right on top of it, because I am going to talk about stress as one of the things going forward, and the effect on the mind. However, the stress response in and of itself is calorie burning. The aspect of increasing the sympathetics, fight or flight, right? It requires calorie burning. The problem, and I want to get into this, and this goes into the problems or the negative consequences of stress, is that our body expects to be moving in a stress response, to be burning glucose. Right. What happens is people just are sitting. They're at their desk. They're in their home. They're sitting and worrying. Mm-hmm. But the makeup of it is to fight or flight. You're either gonna fight or you're gonna run. And when you don't burn the calories, that's where you have a certain amount of issues. Now, the cortisol issue is what happens with chronic stress and cortisol decrease, because cortisol, I'm not going to get into the craze, but the cortisol problem, Camille, is how cortisol it's cortisone. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's what's going out to bring down inflammatory as well as stress response. What happens to an adrenal fatigue situation is the cortisol is suppressed. And also, but initially, let me just stop. Initially, it's overproduced. Cortisol changes insulin sensitivity. Because we understand it. It doesn't want the insulin to store glucose. It wants to make it available and bring it, right? So that's what cortisol does. The problem is the stress response is not supposed to be hyper stress response all the time. That's not nature. That's not how we evolved. But it's now constant or nearly constant. And what that's doing is disturbing insulin, and we're having and then what occurs is it brings it to fat storage. It's a huge problem. As you all know what you're pointing out. But the stress response itself, in and of itself, is a calorie burner, but it's a great opportunity. If you're going to run, you're going to exercise. Stress response goes up. Burn the calories. So metabolism's okay. I said it before. Extremely efficient.
Just one more question. Are you going to get to how one changes their metabolism?
No. That's not for today.
Okay, because you had mentioned that it's not had to do with metabolism.
Yeah. It's much bigger. I know we put metabolism in there, and I am talking about metabolism. I will. I think. Let me see. I will get to it a little bit, and around the stress response. So I will get to it. But really, just if we can walk away with a couple of pearls, the question is how, in the aspect of making someone, gain their leanness, increase their leanness, which would of course be fat loss, right? But gain this, how do they become more metabolically active? And really, two things. One, it's really cool. So let's go back to the person who is obese or above 30% body fat. They are in the starvation mode. How do you take someone out of a starvation mode? How do you change the signaling to the body? And I'll send out to anyone if anyone has an idea on that. I believe I know, and this is actually my own work. And this is why exercise is so incredibly important, and or changing the cellular state so that water goes into a muscle cell. What happens is the muscle cell becomes much less. It's called crenation. It shrinks. Muscle cells shrinks. So you can have someone who puts on 3, 4, 5 pounds of muscle, and they never gained a gram of new muscle. What they did was the muscle became active and soaked up and took water in. So the muscle cell became it increased twice the size to a normal size. But it also increased its activity. It also contracts over a longer period, burning more. See, this is how you do it. So how you break the cycle of starvation mode is to gain any leanness of muscle. Whether you bring it in, increase it by water coming in, which is, it's not just water, it's water coming from the outside into the muscle. It's totally different. And or putting on new muscle. As soon as you gain ounces of new muscle, you're not starving anymore. And the system starts to shut down. That's one. Of course, in all the other ones. But so one of the other aspects is the specific use of exercise. Now, just one pearl here is, I've seen this for years, and we all have seen it. You go into the gym and you see I use a woman as an example. You see the woman, on the treadmill or on something and going like a bat out of hell. You're like, it's a heavy woman. Holy crap. I wish I could do what she's doing. And she's on that thing, sweating up like crazy, because she believes that the more she sweats and the higher her heart rate, the more she's going to lose. You come back a year later, she's still on it, and she gained weight. And you say, why? And the reason is, it has to do with heart rate. It has to do with aerobic and anaerobic heart rate. When they bring their heart rate above aerobic capacity into an anaerobic state, they go from fat burning to sugar burning. Mm-hmm. And they're burning and sweating like crazy, high heart rate, not watching their heart rate. They get off, and guess what? They're hungry. They burn their blood sugar. They go, and then they have cravings, and then they're eating, and boom, and this terrible cycle. And people don't realize how to train heart rate and how to get high fat burn from the heart rate, and how to train that up so you're burning more fat per unit time. So it's really quite interesting. So that in the exercise aspect, walking, that's why I tell people, walking is an assured way of always being in fat burning. The thing is you could be burning a thimble full of fat if you progress your cardio at the same point, where now at a higher heart rate you're still aerobic, and now you're burning a cup of fat. And it's really interesting. Expert. Very few people understand this concept and the hows and the whys of training in such a way. So the movement is critical, and of course, high density nutrient food is critical. And then you determine, what is the dietary protocol. But let's get into the mind, because the mind is the thing that needs to be fed. You can give someone, as we all know, the perfect dietary plan, the perfect exercise plan, and they fail. Because you failed to feed the mind, and everyone needs something different often. Now, it's not a huge spectrum, but you need to feed the mind. Okay, did the starving, did the metabolism, great. Let's get into mind control. So, what is a craving? Anybody out there? Thoughts on what a craving is?
I think it's what your body needs.
Right.
What body asks for what it wants.
I agree. What you're missing.
Okay. All right. And
the pattern that's set up by your mind.
I'm sure that it's a lot more technical than that, but you can tell us.
Well, here's the thing that I thought of a long time ago regarding this. When people have a craving, it's really interesting. If people have a craving and they're eating really healthy food, I would agree with you. But most people who have a craving are not eating healthy food. The vast majority of them. And we won't get into what sensitizes this. We won't get into how this is created, but we'll talk about a couple of different things actually regarding this. But here, in my thought, what a craving is. The brain's fuel supply. The brain burns 20% of all of our calories in a given day. That being said, if we're over consuming, of course, it's not 20% because the vast majority, a good portion is going to fat deposition, right? It's being stored as stored energy in fat. But the part of our basal metabolic rate, 20% of all calories are being burned by the active brain. The brain requires glucose, and it can use ketone bodies as well, but the body requires glucose. And it requires glucose on a steady state. It requires glucose just like your car engine. When you hit the gas, it's a smooth flow of fumes, if you will, that are coming into the engine. You know, that not fumes, but a steady state of liquid flow. We know that if it hesitates and it's broken up, if the flow is broken up, the engine will hesitate. But what do we see? We all know. We see people with hypoglycemic states. We all see people whose insulin is fluctuating throughout the day because of carbohydrates. It's not just carbohydrates, and we can maybe get into that a little bit. But the foods they choose to eat, the lack of movement, the lack of burning of the fuel, all of this, the imbalance of fats, lots and lots go into this. But we know that instead of a constant glucose amount in the blood, we're seeing highs and lows occurring, and those are occurring because of insulin's dysfunction for the most part, for the vast most part. And what does that mean? Well, on the highs, the brain is being flooded by glucose, and any flooding of glucose, particularly it doesn't require insulin. What is it? It sensitizes the brain cells. It wants more of that to a great extent. It's very simplistic and very basic. But when it goes down, right? When it goes down, you've sensitized it to a high state. When it goes down and the glucose is not available, those brain cells require a constant flood, a constant stream of energy. When they don't get it, what happens? Brain cells or groups of brain cells don't know what a Snickers bar is, or what a Yukon Gold potato is. But what it does know is that the Snickers bar is glucose in 45 seconds, and that the medium chain carbohydrate is glucose in 26 minutes. Right? It's that difference. A craving is mind control. It is the control of your mind from the unconscious. It's the conscious mind from an unconscious state. Your brain saying to choose the pretzel, to go for this. I'm hungry. You know, and people who are overweight certainly aren't starving to death. Of course, we get into the aspect the body thinks they're starving to death, which increases the brain cycling. You can start to see how this all starts to come together. A body signaling that believes it's starving to death. The brain is also engaged in that. You eating inappropriately and cycling your glucose supply, it's like, okay, I gotta eat the cookie. That's 35 seconds sugar to me, and don't eat the plant-based diet because it takes like 45 minutes to get that stuff into me. And that's what a craving is. A craving is a forced, mindful force by your brain rationalizing it. How many of us, you open the refrigerator, why'd you open it? Well, why'd you open the pantry? How many times have we had clients, they keep opening and closing, looking for something not healthy, and their pantries are full of it. They're making the stops for the fast food, and that's the reason. That's what a craving is from my perspective over the years. So let's move into the microbiome.
Don,
yes.
Can I just add something to that? Because
Sure.
I also think a craving is not only like when you're opening that refrigerator over and over and over again, sometimes it's sheer boredom and your body's not really asking for anything. Sometimes when you're actually hungry, you're really thirsty, you think you're hungry, you just need water. I just know from my own experience that I had to learn that I used to many years ago. I used to attach emotion to food, or an activity to food. So if I sat in front of the TV well, actually, it started in college. I used to eat Cheetos when I studied. So I literally could not open a book without thinking of Cheetos.
Yes.
And it was a total conditioned response. So
Yes.
I had to break myself of the habit of, there's a lot of help from Weight Watchers decades ago. I had to break myself from the habit of, like, when I sit down on a TV, like if I sat down to watch TV, I can't have any food. Like, I just don't have food because it became a habit. So I think a lot of people also eat just out of habit. They're in the car. It's like, you know, smoking. There's, you know, having a drink in your hand when you're sitting at a bar. Like, there's lots of habits that are contributing to our glucose levels and not trying to figure, you know.
Yeah, great point, by the way.
I used to have lots of drinks as I was making dinner. I actually have a serious blood sugar issue until I learned how that worked. Like, I couldn't sleep through the night, and then I was tired, and then it threw off my morning because, you know, I didn't sleep well because my glucose was all over the place, and, you know, learning what the insulin and everything was like.
Yeah.
But some of the cravings are in your total mindset. Yeah.
And by the way, I agree with 100%. One, the aspect, the inability to differentiate between thirst and hunger. I absolutely agree with, and that's well researched. I absolutely agree with, and we all know empirically that's correct, right? The other thing is very interesting. Habituation as opposed to a craving. I don't know if we could call them both. The craving is kind of an interesting drive. However, the aspect of food association and habitual action, by the way, it is, it's not like someone that has a bad habit of whatever it is. Food habituation, like smoking with nicotine, it's a molecular link. Yep. It's a molecular link. You know, you're eating those Cheetos. Man, those Cheetos have stuff on it that drive the brain crazy and an addictive aspect. And you put that together with a behavior, you are in a shitload of trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta. So but let's put that out there as something that, again, and by the way, great addition, Camille. And I'd like, and but I'm just putting this out there for the forum, for us, is to, in essence, to separate those two. One is the craving, right? And the other one is the habituation with food, the activity habituation with food. Whether also it is boredom looking for something, but I think that's another piece. That's another piece. But I like that. I really do like that. And when working with clients, to differentiate and cause distinctions between the two, and we need and two different approaches, by the way, in order to deal with both of those. Yes, stabilize the system, stabilize the body, what have you, but we might need some behavioral modifications or some other components for that. So just really quickly, the microbiome, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially with the autonomic nervous system stuff. I really, and this is just very recent for me, everyone, is that I'm starting to look at the microbiome with weight loss, and just in this one area, even though I'm not really doing a lot of it, of course, I'm thinking about it, that a dysbiotic microbiome, depending upon how it goes, depending upon which pathologic microbiota rise, either singularly or acting together and as a complex, that they're acting as in essence, parasitic mind controllers that are causing cravings. Now, this is a different type of craving, right? That we're actually being abducted mindfully on the unconscious level by our by our microbiome. And this goes back to like the Costa Rican wasp, the emerald wasp, the Costa Rica, where they inject their pupa into what is it? Spider. It's a globe. I think it's a globe spider and something like that. And the spider, the larva in the spider, force it to make a cocoon that it's never made before, in order to host the larva as they eat the spider and go into the cocoon. It's a great example of zombie or mindful control of a bug, of a parasite, acting upon us. And I'm just putting it forward that this, I do believe this happens. And there's plenty of research out there showing, of course, certain bacilli and other things that are associated with obesity. It's plenty researched out there. I don't know if they're looking at it from a mind control aspect, but I do think as part of a lean gain program that we look to affect the microbiome to help, if that's a force on someone, it's a very difficult thing to overcome unless we're really addressing the microbiome there.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please jump in.
Yeah. So, right. So if you have a big candida infection, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, your candida, you're going to be craving a lot more sugar. And so, we can keep like working on our mindset, working on our mindset, changing our thinking, doing all of this. Meanwhile, the gut is saying, feed me, like Seymour, right? In Little Shop of Horrors, right? So, it's like you're working against it. You really need to address multi arms of this, if you will. If you're just addressing the mindset, you're not addressing the candida infection, it's going to be a little bit more difficult maybe to override what you're trying to do with the mind.
I couldn't agree more, Callie. I couldn't. Well, by the way, great point bringing up the candida part of it, which is massive, potentially massive, and so many people. Absolutely. But I think what we're seeing here is not to make it complex, but in helping people with their lean gain, with transforming their metabolism, transforming their body. And really it comes down to in its lean gain percentage. Weight loss is about fat loss. Fat loss is also, you're going to become leaner, and utilizing both molecular nutritional aspects and of course movement capacities. But that when we do these things, we have kind of a checklist to look at. We look at the microbiome. Are we considering that for this person? Is it an issue? If it is, we have to put it in. Of course, mindful parameters, aspects of coaching. Of course, what is the food approach that best suits them? And of course, are these people suffering from insulin-based issues? And it's pretty easy. The vast majority are. 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 are. But of course, there's other issues that some people do not have that problem. And of course, we can look at labs and other things along those lines. Nothing too crazy either. And by the way, and I really should send this to everyone, a very simple way of looking at glucose, blood glucose, and insulin function. It's in medicine, they believe that hemoglobin A1C is the gold standard for looking at insulin function, and it's not. Actually what's called postprandial or after eating blood glucose testing that you take if someone eats 45 minutes after they eat and then 2 hours after they eat, you measure the blood glucose and the parameters of how the glucose is coming down, which shows how the insulin's working. And for this case, we use the International Endocrinologist Association parameters as opposed to the American. It's a little more stringent as opposed to the American. And you can actually calculate hemoglobin A1C over a short period of time based on this. So it's a wonderful way of, with clients, taking blood sugar, having them, especially when it's an issue, and having them see and stabilize. And what's really cool is what's the load. You give them a food, the glycemic load, you know what it is. And you can even see, you can give someone a protein, even a ketogenic, a protein meal, and their blood sugar can be off, and you really have a problem then with that individual. It doesn't require carbs to actually change blood glucose, because you'll get dumps. This is from the stress response and other things. You get dumps from the liver. Okay, and I could share that with you guys too. That's you don't have to wait for blood tests. You don't have to send. A lot of people don't have the capacity to send for blood tests. So that's a better way to look at insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance. That's getting better. Okay. So I want to go into just one aspect of carbs that we talked about in the stress response. I said I'd get to it. I want to do it now. and then get into about 5 or 6 points, or 6 points about what we should walk away with tonight. Perhaps we can walk away with these things to think about as we move forward. So, like I said, and Camille talked about the stress response. It's so unbelievably important. And I think, again, microbiome, stress, and really understanding the stress response. Like Camille said, chronic stress, cortisol issues, all of this. But I want you guys to think about it from this aspect. In chiropractic school, when I was a student, you would hear it here and there about carbohydrate allergy. And what it was is you give someone a carbohydrate and their pulse would increase. And they thought that that was an allergy. And by the way, today a lot of people still believe that, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's not an allergy, but it's something far worse. So if you have someone who has a pizza or eats something and they feel palpitations, or they feel their heart racing, or you put them on a pulse ox, or you just take the damn pulse and you notice that the pulse, and by the way, the pulse increases quickly. It does not take a long period of time. And if you want to test it, just give someone, a high fructose corn syrup drink and do it. What this is, in my opinion, is a sensitized stress response. And what do I mean by this? And by the way, this is part of that old work of mine. I should write about, but is this. In the normal stress response, you have the stress response, and you get adrenaline as the first layer. Second layer is you're getting the long-term stress response, which is releasing glucose for the fight or flight. Glucose is being released. Quite often it's dysfunctional because people are not fighting or flying, and that creates other issues with too much insulin and other things, a lot of stuff going on. However, what happens over time, I believe, is this. Think about it. And this is why we're seeing such great responses in not only metabolism, but physiology and weight loss. We all know we are under undue amounts of stress in modern society, both externally imposed and internally imposed. And of course, that's another great lecture talk we can have on that. However, it's more than just that. What I put forward is this. When people eat too much of a carbohydrate load, they stimulate a stress response from the carbohydrates. That's what the increased pulse is. What we're seeing is that, in essence, and this could be regulated through the gut, to the microbiome, which actually suppresses, they're supposed to suppress the top, what's called the HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. They're supposed to suppress it. It could be coming from the gut, but more than likely, it's looped within the neurology of it, that the presence of excess glucose, like is seen in the presence of a stress response, fight or flight, when the presence of the glucose level in the blood goes up, it triggers a paradoxical stress response. So that people who are eating too many carbohydrates are having stress responses without stress present. The food, the carbohydrate itself, is driving a stress response. So think about it: stress from all the aspects of where people are getting stress, and they're getting it from food. This talks about, and this is why we see in the ketogenic diets when people say, "Oh, the ketogenic diet," what it does. And whether people, you can use that as an initiation. You can do ketogenic from a plant-based, or ketogenic and move to another thing. You don't have to stay ketogenic, and you probably shouldn't to a great extent, depending. It's like, but you can do a ketogenic as a therapeutic intervention, and drop that down, and really have a massive effect on the sensitized stress response. That's why I believe why so much of the research and seeing people that do this having such a mass physiologic response of a positive nature, why it does, and no one's thinking that it's actually causing a paradoxical stress response additionally to everything else. Okay, So I just wanted to throw that in, just some thoughts on that. Again, going back to, if we think of our big pieces, one, the gut-brain, right? And looking, promoting a normalizing gut ecology. And I'm going to link that, and we're almost done here, everyone. But I'm going to link that to mindfulness as well. But so just listen, some of us, like Jenna down in Princeton Integrated Health, Kelly, I'm sure you will be getting into this as far as, gut studies, microbiome studies. We see things like decreased butyrate, it's a small chain fatty acid, and ghrelin and leptin and other small peptides that are associated with inappropriate issues of the microbiome that's associated with obesity, associated with weight gain. There's certain things in the microbiome that are associated with this. And by the way, those are specifics, but we don't have to really think in specific. I don't like to. I did testing, lots of testing for lots of years. Boy, I find that overview approaches and understanding what's going on, we can have mass effect without doing lots and lots of testing. And my preference is actually, if I want to do testing, to do it if I run into a problem. Not the fact that testing can't show us stuff right away. So gut-brain, again, microbiome. 2, inflammation. I know inflammation is a huge topic, but we've covered some areas of it already. That an individual, and probably 25% body fat or over, but definitively 30% or over. And by the way, I just saw someone was talking about the fact that 80% of the population is 25% or more body fat. I've always felt the statistics, that's a good number. I've always felt statistics are too low for the amount of people overweight and higher body fat. And years ago, when I started doing BIA, bioimpedance analysis testing, with a higher grade equipment, that I could line up 20 women, and everyone would look at them and say, "Look how thin they are," and they were all sarcopenic obese. They were all over 30% body fat because they're lean mass. They don't exercise. They don't eat well. They have a thin appearance, but they're all obese, and it's mind-boggling. Everyone's looking at people who look that they're fat or overweight or carrying too much fat. There's a lot of skinny fats walking around, simply because we don't move, simply because we do not stress our bodies enough in nature. So inflammation, of course, in the stress response, we are inflamed. Just to the stress response, cortisol imbalances, insulin specifically, the most pro-inflammatory molecule in the body is insulin. Insulin, and by the way, when we have dysinsulinemia, and often insulin, part of the problem is polymorphisms of insulin. That insulin is being produced, the molecule, the protein's quaternary structure of the molecule is being produced incorrectly, and it can't hook onto glucose, or it can't hook onto the receptor site. A lot of free-floating insulin is out there, and if it's not working, it's like bad boys with nothing to do but cause trouble. It's causing trouble, and it's one of the most inflammatory molecules in the body. So with stress, with cortisol, all that, systems are inflamed. And if you see someone who's overweight, if they're overweight, I guarantee you they're over 30% body fat. They are systemically inflamed. And if they have an out of balance autonomic nervous system, they are neuroinflamed as well. Okay, 3, less ability to suppress to suppress the stress response. We talked about that. Mindfulness practices, and this is where I believe we're going to be doing this down at, and we are. I know in Princeton. Mindfulness and meditations, but mindfulness practice is so vital and important to lean gain, the loss of fat. We talked about this. We talked about this in one of the Zoom calls, right, Camille? The aspect of mindfulness, and I've expanded that thinking actually since then to the aspect of mindfulness is really like a waking rest. It's actually waking rest as opposed to unconscious rest or sleep, and it's extremely vitally important. But mindfulness practice is one of the things that will help the gut. Just one aspect. Mindfulness will help when you put probiotics, do proactive things for the gut. Mindfulness practice, daily mindfulness practice, which basically is, it must be a part of conscious, expansive awareness. Expanding conscious awareness is so vital in mindfulness. What that does to the autonomic nervous system, how that brings things back online, how that helps the gut, and by the way, of course, decreasing stress response. I can get into the neurology of it, but it is vital, and it's vital to teach. And that's the other thing, talking about, you talked about people, what did you say with, protecting themselves. I'm not sure I agree with people who are eating to protect themselves. My feeling on this is that it's pain and pleasure. I found over the years, and of course, women are usually in front of you as opposed to men, but it applies across the board. It's about pain and pleasure, that they're using the opioid aspects of food, the pleasure-based aspects of food, both on a molecular level, as well as if it's an indoctrinated belief system from childhood, depending on how they were fed and how their relationship with food is. It's about that they are lacking pleasure. I find it in relationships, married couples, that there's such issue that often the person's life is quite void, and that they move to food for the molecular addictive aspect of the pleasure it provides, even though it's just temporary. And I find it so important to speak to these people, about that, to find pleasure in their life, even in the aspect of denial. It's a big problem when there's food in front of them, and a bad food, and they are so devoid of pleasure and self-pleasure that to say no through willpower alone to the food, it will eventually succumb. Whether it's the mind control of the gut, whether it's all the other things that we talked about, plus things we have not talked about, that they will succumb and fail. And a reframing, as Brian said earlier, the reframing of understanding that I like to teach this. When you say no to the food in the present, you're saying, and I reframe them and I anchor them with this as well. You're saying, when you say no to the food in the present, you're saying yes to your future self. So you're saying yes. And denial is not forever. And it's not denial. It's actually saying yes to the person you want, to that which you can become. So it's not no and denial moment. Now, the other thing that's so vitally important with this mix is this. I learned this just on myself when I was training and working out in my early 20s, that in that moment, right, when you say no, and when you don't eat that food, you're not getting the pleasure response. There is a void. And as we all know, we cannot exist in a void. We will fail. The person will fail. But what happens, and we all know this, is that when you say no, in that moment, everyone's eating cake. You're at a birthday party. Everyone's eating cake, and you're the one who pushes the cake away. There is a pleasure, and quite often the people who have a difficult time with this, the voice of pleasure is so low, they have to focus on it, but it's there. The aspect of the feeling good about themselves, the pleasure that comes with pushing it away and succeeding. It's the pleasure of success. You couple that, and by the way, they hear it, they feel it, but then what you do is you have them focus on it, and to increase it, to amplify that, so that in the future when they say no, that pleasure's right there. That the pleasure of that action, of that becoming, can become more potent than the molecular, which will abate. The molecular addiction to the opioid aspects of the food. So you couple those two things together, saying no to the food, but saying yes to your future self, and the aspect of seeking and finding the pleasure within that action and within that behavior and amplifying it. That's extremely, extremely important. So I think that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have to wrap it up soon.
We're good. I'm good.
Well, thank you, Dr. Don, again for a wonderful functional life form. Does anyone have any last minute questions before we end the call? Everyone good? Okay, if something comes up afterwards, you can email Dr. Don directly, or you could let us know and we can forward the message to him, so there's no problem there. Or if you're watching this on replay and you have a question, you can reach out to Dr. Don directly.
Good.
Did you want to say something else? You had your... No? Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was
All right,
great.
everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.